Welcome to Brave Conversations. Domo, konnichiwa. Watashi wa Hasu-san desu.
I have nothing for you. I have hello. How are you? How are you doing? Greetings.
This is my beautiful mother and co-host,
April.
And today we are talking about Noah. The flood washed away a corrupt world, but it didn't wash away the human heart. Noah's family shows how brokenness can survive even after a fresh start.
Yes, absolutely.
So the question we are going to be, or we hope to answer by the end of this episode is a godly legacy enough to produce godly children? Or must every generation choose faithfulness for itself? Before we dive in, any comments about Noah and the ark at all? The full story.
There is no, you know what? I will say this. Prior to 2022, when I read the story of Noah, and I've read it multiple times, obviously, I'm no spring chicken. So I've read it many times throughout my lifetime. And if I'm going to be real and honest, yeah, there were moments where I read about Noah and the flood and thought, impossible. You know what I'm saying? Like, right. This is impossible. There are other times that I didn't feel like that. I felt like, oh, this is very possible, but maybe, felt like other things were impossible. But the more I get closer to God, the more I grow closer to Him, and He reveals things to me. And the more I start to realize that everything is connected, right? There's no separation of spiritual life versus the natural life, what's happening, to us here on earth. The more I realize that the only real separation is us separated from God in that relationship, but there's no difference, and the more I begin to realize that I can always see like correlations of things that I thought was spiritual, I could see it happening in the natural. And so what I'm trying to say is that in 2022, there was a lot of rain, not just in our state, in other states. And so there was like this nationwide, or people that were affected, these floods that started to happen in these states. And these were what was interesting is that the flooding was in areas that flooding typically does not happen, right? There's no nearby rivers. There's no, nothing like that. And so, of course, here in St. Louis, we experienced that flood around, it was the summer, July, and it was happening over days. And so the flooding here happened July 26th. So I know there were some days prior, it happened in other states, and then even afterwards, right? July 27th, 28th, other states were, because this rain, I guess this storm is just moving. And so what was interesting is, one, I was like so confused as to why, like, just, okay, it's rain. What about this rain was different than the hundreds, if not thousands of other times that it's rained, in my lifetime? And what was different is that they talked about that over that short period of time that we had received like a month's worth or whatever rain in just that short period of time. We stayed in a particular area that was not really affected by the flood, but yet we were. Us and maybe some surrounding neighbors. And so we were not like known on the news as an area that potentially had this flooding. But what was unique is that not only were our house and these surrounding neighbors' houses flooded, but we actually had a fire truck who I'm assuming maybe was out trying to maybe go help. The fire truck, because the fire truck wasn't our local municipality fire truck. So I'm not sure what that fire truck was doing there. But the fire truck it was flooded so bad, right? The fire truck literally right in front of my house got stuck because I guess it thought it could drive through the water, but it maybe flooded out the fire truck's engine. And it even floated, y'all. The fire truck floated like towards our house, and thank goodness the concrete, the sewer concrete, the uplifted thing, caught it and stopped it. But it was stuck because it was flooded out. And so we learned something new that day, which is you can't tow a fire truck regularly. Duh, I guess that makes a lot of sense. It probably weighs tons.
It needed a special tow.
It needed this special tow. This thing was huge. It was like this big old huge crane, because we were wondering why the floodwaters had receded and hours were passing by, but these firefighters and this fire truck was still out there. And we're like, why can't they go? Like, what, call a tow truck. But eventually this big, ridiculously huge, I'm talking about looking like it was built to build buildings, crane looking thing finally came and was finally able to tow this fire truck. The devastations of that flood impacted us as if we were in some of those big flood areas. And I'm not going to talk about the challenges I faced, because when I was trying to seek help, there were a lot of organizations at first that thought that I guess what I was trying to be fraudulent, like I wasn't really in a flood like my area, because our area typically it didn't flood. It just kind of flooded by our house. I feel like that was an act of God. God definitely got my attention. But with that being said, what I'm trying to say is that the amount of damage that happened just over some hours of rain, the amount of flooding, how high the water had got in just some hours, from that moment on, I no longer had doubt or question how the entire earth can flood from, what was it, like 40 days and nights of rain. Also in his word, it wasn't just rain coming from heaven. It said that springs under the earth opened up. So again, we live by a creek. We were living by a creek. So I'm sure it was the rain coming down plus what was coming up from this creek that contributed to the amount of flood that we experienced. So I just wanted to share that, because I'm sure that anybody can go research flooding, rains, exactly what I'm talking about. This was also in the same year and same time where the Death Valley, I forget what it is, it hadn't rained like that in over 100 years or something, and that also got flooded out, and that is something that was uncommon. And so when you see these I call them supernatural. It's almost like acts of God type weather. It's phenomenons, or if you will. I just wanted to share all that to say that if anybody reads this story, because I feel like I've seen a lot of people comment on that about Noah and the flood in particular, like the impossibility of it. And sometimes they use Noah's story as the catalyst as to why they don't believe God is real. But I'm saying, I think we've made this more of a fairy tale, a fable, if you will, in our own minds. But when you look in the real and the natural, these things have happened on smaller scale. So if you think about the flooding that happened in all of those states just over a couple days and just over a few hours of rain, where, we're not talking about just property damage. We're talking about unfortunate life lost as well. A lot of people lost their lives during this as well. And even flooding and rain, floods connected to rain even after that, right? The years after 2022 has happened. And so if you think about it like that, and like stop trying to make it be some type of fairy tale and make it be some type of fable, if you think about in the real natural, these things that have actually happened, I no longer doubt it. It no longer feels like it's an impossibility for me. It no longer feels like this is a fairy tale, impossible. I actually read Noah like we did this time. I read it so differently, and I read it just in awe, once again, of the power of God. Is like really a hard, not a hard reminder, but just a mind-opening reminder that God is God. He is the creator. He is in control. And so I just read it differently, and I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, actually, no, I'm glad you brought that up, and that people can ponder on that, because I'll bring that up in a later section, because what I learned, just to comment, what I learned is that we've basically, us Westerners, have been reading it completely wrong, or like we've been looking at it through the wrong lens, I should say. Not reading it wrong, but like,
I'm looking forward to it. Now you got me wanting to jump to it. Just tell me right now.
All right. So back to the question in hand here. This question actually, I never really thought about this question when it came to Noah's story. But when when we were studying for this story, the flood narrative in Noah and his family, I never this question was like, oh yeah, I don't think it's really talked about much. So the modern day assumption to the question, and I'm gonna reread it again just in case. Is a godly legacy enough to produce godly children, or must every generation choose faithfulness for itself? So I would say the modern day assumption is that if the parent loves God, then the children will follow suit. And I don't know if if you're watching this and you're like, oh, that's not true because you have personal testimony. But, and I guess we have a personal testimony, or you, because you're the parent. Yeah. With both me and Aaron. So you probably have some thus far. I mean, we're still pretty young. We're still walking this out. So yeah. But you probably got some insight on that. One verse that pops up frequently amongst the children of God in the Christian community is Proverbs 22, verse 6. And I'm going to read the Common English Bible version because this is like the way this translation is the translation that most people use, and I wanted people to recall this scripture. So the proverb goes, train children in the way they should go. When they grow old, they won't depart from it. I've heard this verse so many times when it comes to people talking about parenting, and the assumption here is that this verse is saying that there's an unconditional promise that faithful parents will guarantee faithful children as long as you train them up the way they should go. Yeah. But scholars understand this proverb to mean to be about wise parenting. And I wanted to bring up something that I was on the train going to work, and I listen to podcasts and stuff. And so I was listening to the podcast that the Bible Project does. They have a podcast, and they were talking about wisdom literature. Literature? Y'all. Braces, remember? I said it. Braces. But they were talking about basically how in academia, theological academia, many people break the Bible into literary types, content. So there's the narratives, the poetry, stuff like that. That's how they kind of section off the books of the Bible. And so I was listening to a podcast about the wisdom the wisdom portion. I'm going to start saying that. Yeah. And the wisdom portion is Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then Songs of Songs, or some people know it as Songs of Solomon. And so one thing that Tim Mackey had pointed out is that people read Proverbs and we thinking that it's guaranteed absolutes. Each proverb is saying basically do this, then this will happen. But he actually said that that's actually not the case. Proverbs is not a book of absolute guarantees. They are actually just general principles that the biblical narrator, which we assume is Solomon to write Proverbs, notices. As he walks with God, he's noticing these things. Yeah. So I say that to say that, and we think this proverb about raising children is an absolute guarantee, but it's just a general principle about wise parenting. Yeah. Something that Solomon probably witnessed in his own parenting, but also, there's several verses where Solomon was like, I was looking out at this person, or I was looking out in this field. He was very observant. He was just watching everything. Yeah. And then gaining wisdom from that. Or, God was giving him revelation about these things. This happens because of this. Yeah. And so, and an example of that is actually a perfect example is Proverbs 24, 30 through 34. When he's talking about the neglected field of a lazy slacker. Oh yeah, that's one of our favorite proverbs to talk about. Anytime we got an inside joke, I guess, where anytime we're like we feeling
Sluggard.
lazy
Yeah.
or like we call we call each other sluggards, and we just like you sluggard. Your field is unkept.
Exactly.
But anyway,
Be like the ant.
that's a perfect
Yeah.
example. Like Solomon literally starts that proverb saying, "I was looking at the field of a lazy slacker and noticed that the crops was overgrown, and then he came to the conclusion that laziness basically you don't see the results of laziness overnight. It's like small stuff that you're lazy on, and then it grows into like this big unkept life, basically messy life." But anyway, I just wanted to give you an example of like how Proverbs should be read.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to read the Amplified version of this verse, because the Amplified version, just to give you a cool tip that I learned from the Beveres, another podcast I listened to, the Amplified version uses the literal Hebrew rendering of words, meaning like you're getting the actual definition. A lot of people don't like the Amplified version because they don't like to read like the brackets. The brackets be long, but the brackets are like the actual Hebrew translation of that verse. And, because like the English language doesn't have the exact words to communicate Hebrew. Yeah. And that's just one of the limitations of having an ancient text in a different language. But anyway, so the literal Hebrew meaning of that first part where it says in the way they should go, it actually says in Hebrew, it says according to the child's way, or according to the child's bent, disposition, or stage of development. And so I told you this already in conversation, but I'm in school, and so one of the books that I had to read for class was a book by Don and Katie Fortune, and it's called Discover Your God-Given Gifts. Highly recommend reading this book. It has been transformational. Highly recommend doing the test to test and see what motivational gifts you possess. And they go into they talk about the different gifts that the Lord lists in the Bible, which I was always curious about. And just go read the book. It's really good. But they actually talk about this verse in that book, and apparently there's like 3 different interpretational views within the Christian scholar realm. But I'm not going to go list all 3 of them. But this is the one that I personally agree with.
Okay.
Whatever you agree with is up to you. But this is called the individualized view. And so this is also the view that Don and Katie hold. They say that this verse is not simply about teaching every child the exact same way, but it's about seeking God's wisdom to understand how he uniquely designed each child, and then disciplining, like you're doing it.
Yeah, disciplining.
Disciplining that child according to God's design for them. So basically it's saying that biblical parenting isn't just about producing obedient children. It's about faithfully stewarding the unique person God entrusted to you.
I like that.
Yes.
I like that.
So before we move into how Noah's story actually kind of challenges the modern day assumption, what are your thoughts on this view of that interpretation?
I mean, my thoughts are always going to be tied back to my experience, and I can definitely testify, as they say, to that definition of it. Because I too had that modern day idea, like, oh, train a child up in the way that they should go, and they will never depart from it. Well, that was instantly challenged. When my kids would be like, Lord, they're departing. Like, what is going on here? And so I began to shift, just from experience, I began to shift my understanding from that verse. And even now, I still feel like it's something that's happening active now. You guys are young adults, and I feel like the one that's showing me the meaning of that in real time the most right now is my son, is Aaron. And so, again, we'll probably have to save that for another time, another day, but it just amazes me sometimes where on surface value, it looks like, there's definitely some departing there. There's definitely some, and I get so concerned and so worried, and then all of a sudden I feel like the incredible something amazing happens, totally wicked. You know what I'm saying? Just happens, and I'm just astonished. And I go back to that verse, and I'm like, so that's what that means.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah.
What came to me when I read that view was that I feel like, and this is not me coming off as judgmental. Again, I'm not a parent. Let's keep that in mind this whole episode. And I'm not saying that to discredit anything I'm about to say moving forward.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like Solomon, where I'm like just observing. I'm
That's
very
good.
watchful.
That's good.
And I'm looking at how other people are parenting their children, and I'm kind of collecting data.
And observation is great. Observation is huge in science and research. So observation works.
Yes. Okay. But I was thinking of like a lot of parents, and correct me if I'm wrong, when they say, "Oh, raise them in the way that they should go," they instantly have this idea of what following the Lord looks like for them, instead of going to the Lord and saying, "What does this look like? How does following the Lord look like?" We're biased on how to follow the Lord. That's why we need Jesus in the first place.
Yeah.
So people raise their children and use this verse as justification, in the way that they feel like you should be worshiping the Lord or walking with the Lord. And we already know our viewpoints are very skewed. God said in his word, your ways are not my ways.
Yeah.
So, that was just my thought.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, so Noah's story actually challenges the modern day assumption that we have and gives evidence to the individualized view that I just read of Proverbs 22:6. So the question is, I kind of already asked this question of you, and you already kind of answered. But when you were raising us as little kids, did you notice that each of us needed something different from the other? And answer this without putting the context of Aaron being on the spectrum. Because Aaron being on the spectrum already answers that question. Like, yes, of course I had to raise you differently.
Yeah.
But I meant like just us, like besides him being on the spectrum, how was that? Did you start to see that as we were growing older?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. It's hard for me to not take that. It is such a huge.
Yeah, a huge
it is
component.
Burned.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It is burned in my mind and my memory. So it is very difficult for me to try to disassociate that element from the real life parenting experience that I had. So I'm not going to dismiss that because Aaron, my child God made him. He's wonderfully made.
That's true.
And so I'm not going to exclude that. But I get what you're saying. But yeah, instantly. But even with that, I can't say this. I can't say this, Autumn. Even with that, yeah. If he didn't have that, you two are just y'all so different in the way y'all minds work. Just so different in the way that y'all minds work, and it's natural that with your first, what you did with your first, you're gonna at least try it with your second, especially if it's successful. Anything that's successful, you're gonna keep doing it. And Aaron debunked that immediately. For me, he debunked that immediately. So I had to be quick on my toes and figure out, wait a minute. Like some of the pastors say when you looking at sermons, y'all ain't getting it. Y'all just ain't getting it. That's kind of what I just instantly, I'm like, oh, he ain't getting it. And of course he has to get it. And so yeah, I definitely had to take an individualized approach. Yes, I feel like him being on the spectrum played a huge part in that. But even, I guess I could entertain even if he wasn't on the spectrum, just the way that y'all minds work anyway, kind of caused me to have to do things differently. But like I said, if I'm going to be honest, yeah, if things worked well with you, I'm going to try the same things.
Yeah.
Why not? It worked with this one. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel if it's working. But then, of course, he challenged me in a lot of areas, to have to be innovative and kind of adjust and really try to get to know him
Yeah, that's what the verse says. Okay.
Yeah.
So before, like always, we like to give the historical and biblical context of the passages that we are going to be discussing, because if you don't have that aspect, then there's no understanding or communicating happening at any level. So the main passages, which I encourage you to go read, we're not going to read all of this because it's several chapters. It's basically Genesis 4 through Genesis 10.
Yep.
Is the whole, basically everything we're going to be discussing. So please, actually, no, do this now. Pause this video and go read it.
That's good. Yeah.
Because, I don't want you in the comments commenting on things if you didn't read the passage.
Yeah.
Because then it's not going to flow.
And let me just add this because it's huge with me. I feel like when you say read, people think, oh, it's just reading. Reading, comprehension is involved in the process of reading.
Correct.
So it's not just reading the words, it's comprehending what you're reading as well.
Yeah. So, yes, meditate on it, and not like people here probably meditating, they think they got to spend hours. I mean, just really think about what you're reading.
Yeah.
Really
I feel like if it's
details.
questions, if you have questions, those are questions you should be chewing on yourself.
Right.
To see if you are able to get a comprehension of it.
Okay. Yeah. So one thing that probably puts people off about reading this particular set of chapters is that the Lord does go through the genealogies.
Ooh, you know how I feel. I've made that very clear.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's rough on a lot of people.
Yes. So when we read the genealogies as Westerners, modern day Westerners, and when I say Westerners, I am referring to, I guess I like to just speak to what I experienced. So I'm not going to speak for the whole Western hemisphere of the earth, meaning I'm not going to speak for Canada. I'm not going to speak for South America. However, Westerners probably include them too. They probably read the same lens as we, because it's just different
maybe
cultures.
Not, but yeah.
And when I say Easterners, I mean people in the Middle East, mainly people within the Jewish culture, mainly, but because but I'm not going to get into all that. But when we read the genealogies, our eyes glaze over, and we like, because we're reading it as historical record, which God blessed us with this historical record. We can use it as historical records and use it to defend the faith.
Yeah.
Because this is actual people and it's recorded in history. However, that was not the intention of the biblical author, which we believe that Moses was the one to write Genesis. That is the belief. That is the belief I have. If you think differently, that's on you. Run with it, because to me it really don't matter who wrote it. It's God's word.
Yeah.
But I hold that Moses is the author of Genesis, the first 5 books of the Bible. And so to an ancient Israelite, so the purpose that Moses had for recording these things was because he never thought that this is going to be, through the generations, the book, the word of God.
Yeah.
That all the nations are going to read. To him, he was just following probably a command from the Lord.
I think it was his immediate assignment. It was
Israel.
It was
Israel. He wanted the Israelites to know their history, to know who God is, who is the God they are serving, who is this God they're worshiping, how did this came to be, what's my purpose. And so that was his intention of writing the genealogy. So to an ancient Israelite, their eyes don't glaze over. This is very important to them because they're trying to identify who this God is that we are now called to worship and be in fellowship with. And so a genealogy told you everything. It told them their identity, their inheritance, the covenant relationship they have with the Lord, and their place in God's story. Okay. So that is why the genealogies are there, and that is why we should pay close attention to it, because your family wasn't just your relatives, it was your identity.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
But it's the names for me. It's not the fact that there are names, because I feel like maybe I wouldn't be like that if it was simple names.
Right.
Right. I wouldn't be like that if, Joseph begot Timothy and Timothy begot Sam.
No.
And you know what I'm saying? I think I would be, I could follow along a little bit better.
Names are very important.
Yes.
Okay. God don't play about names. Okay. We see that all throughout scripture.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Put some respect on their name.
And you know what? No, this is funny. So, Eileen, we were just talking yesterday. Well, we not just talking, not something related to this, but we were talking about the importance of names. We were talking about naming, like how I came up with Autumn's name, with Aaron's name.
Yeah.
Told the story about my name, how my name came about. So we were just talking about names, and what do we ended with? Names are important.
Yeah, names are very important. So I've been reading. So in the process of me studying for this episode, I was reading a book. I'm gonna suggest a lot of books this episode and make sure that I put them in the description box so you guys can go research the titles. But one book that I was reading it's called The Lost World of the Flood, and it talks about the flood narrative, and it goes over a lot of stuff. Like, it's very interesting stuff. You should read it. But it's by John H. Walton. And he actually says that the genealogies are not meant to be read as historical documents, but as theological history. Now, let me break that down.
Okay.
Theological history is he was basically saying that the history part of it, these are actual historical events that happened in history. He's not disputing that. But he's saying that they all have a theological purpose that was inspired by God to Moses.
Okay.
So the way that Moses wrote the genealogies, who he included, who he didn't include it, is for a purpose. It's trying to teach us a theological lesson about the Lord, basically. And I say that to say is that the genealogies are a theological history. And so then we can go into why. The big question is why does the Lord or Moses goes from Cain's, he lists out Cain's legacy, and then he lists out Seth's legacy, and we just think, oh, he's just kind of listing out, the legacy of the remaining people on earth. However, we are supposed to read these legacies as contrast to each other. God is presenting two different cultures by showing you Cain's line.
Oh, for sure. Versus
Seth's line. So when you're reading these genealogies, look at it as a contrast that the Lord is trying to reveal to us. So let's get into it. Let's talk about their lines. So just a general overview of Cain's line is that you see Cain's line has city building. He builds a city. The first mention of city building. There's technological advancement in his line, but there's also violence and there's also pride. Yeah. Key representative here. And notice how Moses puts emphasis on Lamech. You're probably like, he lists all these people, but he focuses on Lamech. And there's a reason for that. There's purpose of why he focus on Lamech, is because Lamech shows us how sin from Cain, sin was like he was trying to hide it a little bit, and but it was still sin. And then Lamech is just boastful. He like, oh yeah, I'm that man. Look what I did to this man who just disrespected me a little bit.
And ain't nothing gonna happen to me, because just like with Adam, yeah.
And so Lamech normalized violence. And so then you have, on the other hand, when you read Seth's line, you see worship. You see people calling upon the Lord. You see people walking with God. And the key figure here is also Lamech. That's another thing. You kind of see compared, that's how you know you're supposed to read it as a comparison, because they literally use the same names for several people. But you also have Lamech, but the key figure here is Noah. But the fact that Lamech is the father of Noah just shows you that Moses is trying to get you to see the link.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you see preservation of this going through Seth's line, of this walking with God and calling upon the Lord.
And I think that goes to when I was first reading it, or not first reading it, when I was reading it again for the focus of this episode, because I was reading like most people read, right, instead of reading first for comprehension. And as I glossed over it, I got tied up. And I was like, hold on. Lamech? The murderer Lamech? When I was reading, and I had to go back and trace it a little bit more careful to realize that those were separate lines and separate people. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Moses wrote it this way with the assumption that his audience, which is the ancient Israelites, will make the connection because they know their word, they know their history. And so